Oh, this is so exciting. Good morning.
Good
So,
morning in Maryland. Coming from
and good
Maryland.
morning from Maui.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I'm Kamilah Dozier, and
And I'm Jen. Clearly, this is our first time doing this. Not our first time speaking to each other, but first time being on record while we speak to each other.
yes, so I have known Jen for, holy moly, I have known Jen for 17 years. Wow, what a gift it's been. So, just quick synopsis, I think, of each of us. I grew up going to church with my family every Sunday. I believed in God as a young child. Um, I read the Bible a lot, but I did not understand a personal relationship with Jesus at all, or what the whole thing was all about. I went away to college. I stopped going to church really, maybe once a year or something. I would read my Bible a couple times a year. Still believed in God, didn't really believe in Jesus, wasn't sure what to make of organized religion in general, kind of like one of those God is everywhere, he's in the trees, he loves me kind of people, but also like, yeah, I'm definitely saved. So very mixed up and confused. And it was when I was about 28 that I was like very isolated, kind of miserable in my life, but never acknowledging it. Very afraid of people and relationships, not really ever dealing with anything in my heart. And I just realized like I just want more than this. Didn't know how to get it. And then my sister, who actually was a true believer in Jesus, in the Bible, was kind of like God's way of showing me the truth. And I studied the Bible with her and with other women from the church. I came to know Jesus, like, had a huge, crazy, amazing conversion. And that was in 2002. I was baptized and came to fall in love with Jesus and know the actual truth about God. And I met Jen shortly thereafter. We became roommates, and I was terrified. And she was just like the soothing balm to my fearful soul. She was so sweet and wonderful. And I couldn't believe what kind of a beautiful, loving person she was. And we shared a studio apartment in Hollywood, and it was tiny. And it was so fun. And we were babies in our faith and we didn't know anything. And I thought I knew a little bit and I really didn't. But I knew Jesus and that's all we needed. And so now it's 20 years later after my baptism, and God has been calling both of us to share what he shares with us. So I don't think either one of us feel like, oh my gosh, I'm amazing and I'm gonna share all of my amazingness with people. It's really more like I am amazed by how much God loves me. It's true that he never leaves me. If I were him, I would have left him. I would have left myself alone. I would have just been fed up. Like, I already saved you. I've taught you everything. What's your That's not who he is. He comes daily and he rains down his wisdom and his spirit of love. And we just want to share what he has shared with us, with everyone. So
Mhm.
that's my little intro. Jen, would you like to share about your journey?
Sure. That was beautifully said. For me, I am turning 40 this year, very, very soon. So, being a very spiritual number, I'm glad to say, okay, I'm on this new adventure and journey, but my journey has really started since I was a child. I think I picked my first children's Bible when I was like 5 or something. And I just remember falling in love with the stories, falling in love with God. Not really attending church. No one in my family really dedicated their life to God, anything like that. But unfortunately, there was a lot of abuse, a lot of negative ways of relating to each other. Thankfully, my mother since has um, gained a relationship with God, but during my the younger years, I had a lot of brokenness from my mother and even my stepdad. And so, growing up in an abuse home, you tend to look for love and life outside of you, and you hope to gravitate towards anyone that might show you a glimpse of love. And for me, that was with men. And eventually there was somebody that proposed to me. At that point, I didn't love him, and we barely knew each other, but he was a broken man and I was a broken woman. And so when he proposed, I thought, great, salvation, someone to not leave me, someone to stay with me forever. And we eloped in Las Vegas, and it lasted about 3 months. And I literally would say, is this hell? It was horrible. It was horrible. Not the first time I thought about suicide, but definitely another moment in my life where I thought I might as well just die. And one day I came home from work and to an empty apartment where he apparently had the day off to go to the doctor, but instead he moved out and left a note, "You don't have a husband." So in that
Mm,
moment, I remember being on my knees, not praying, but cursing God, literally cursing God with a fist and hand shaking at the ceiling, talking to the God that I knew was listening. And yet I hated him with all my passion. And I told him I hated him and how could you, and all the things that I've been through. And so interesting events happened right after, which was, that was like a Tuesday. That Sunday, my aunt invited me to this one church that she had been attending. I went. These women, the same church that Kamilah has mentioned, they also studied the Bible with me right away. 2 months later, huge transformation in my life, and I was baptized. Like to say that was the beginning of like this new beautiful adventure, and it was. However, there was still so much to heal and break down for this little heart inside of me to get well. And so it's been 17 years for me, and I'm still on this journey with God. And just a few years ago, I believe I was baptized by the Holy Spirit in the way that the Book of Acts talks about. So there's a whole new dimension of my relationship to God that's been revealed to me that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the past, and I'm grateful for now. And but God is still working, and my relationship with Kamilah has been a huge component to my healing along the years. She's been the one that I've been literally at her feet at different times, just learning from her wisdom and getting help about when I'm living in denial. She's the first person to say something's really wrong here. And I'm like, where, what, huh? That's not true. And I'll get mad at her, but she's always right. So that's a good friend. She's somebody that has told me the truth about me. And because of that, I've been able to grow. And I'm very grateful for this partnership. And I do feel, you know, God has wanted to bring our relationship together for that many years for a purpose, not just for the benefit that I've received of having a friend like her and receiving healing, but also because friendship, fellowship, you could think of Lord of the Rings, like Frodo and Samwise, or Jonathan and David in the Bible. Friendships are to bring each other closer to the Lord, and not just for the two of them, but they inspire others to, seek their strength in God too. And the more well we get, the more opportunities we have to share the healing with others. And I think that's really what we want to get together and talk and just have an opportunity to share the whisperings of God, the places of our hearts that are healed, and what we'd like to offer others in hope, but also the places that are still unhealed and the messiness of that, and how
mhm.
friendship conversations can help. I mean, before we recorded, Cam's helping me have hope in the darkest places of my life, and I'm writing notes because I'm not there yet, and I want to be there. So I think our friendship is a gift from God for each other, but also for others.
Mm, wow, that was beautiful. I was actually, as you first started talking, I was thinking, dang it, I need a retake. That was so good. I didn't say any of that stuff. And then I was like, oh, that's just the enemy. Amen. Like
Yeah.
that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. Wow. Yeah, I agree. I feel like our friendship has been, I feel like I had beautiful gift from God in our friendship. And it's so evident because I didn't know how to have a real friendship. Like not to say I didn't have friends before, but I usually kept even my closest people, and I didn't have a lot of people. I was dealing with a lot of fear and shame in my life, not realizing it was connected to childhood sexual abuse. I never even realized that was what had happened to me when I
Mhm.
was really young, because I was so promiscuous as a teenager and in my 20s. So as a young adult, I thought that I was promiscuous when I was 5. Like it just all got in the same category. I didn't realize until right after my baptism,
Mm.
because that was really the first time in my life where I was welcoming in truth because God was with me. Most of my life up until I was 28 was just about surviving. Like, and survival meant being in denial about pain. I don't want to look at that, So one of the ways I coped was I didn't have a lot of intimacy in my life, like intimate friendships. Even my closest friendships, I would never show my real pain. I would not be uncomfortable. I would show my strength. That was just my way of coping. So if you don't show your weaknesses to your friends, then how your friendships can't be super deep, you know?
Mhm.
And so because I just didn't trust anybody,
Mm.
I was always longing for friendships, but it was like one hand was going like this, and then one hand was like,
Mhm. Oh,
stay there. So,
mhm.
so the fact that I don't know, the way God designed our friendship, I felt like it was this special gift because it gave me someone that totally was so disarming. You were just so, I don't know how to say it, but it disarmed me where I didn't feel like I needed to protect myself. And I always felt like I have to protect myself. And I don't know. It was beautiful. It was something that I got to experience before I was able to produce it myself. Like now, 20 years later, I'm able to fight through my defenses to build deeper relationships with people. And to
Mhm.
build deep relationships, God has shown me I have to be willing to be vulnerable and to be uncomfortable. And
Okay. Well, I can piggyback off that because I feel like right now, as a person that just moved out of LA, I'm not around you as much. And so I'm in Maryland now. And I think I struggle with that all over again because I have choices to make. Once you're hurt in any season of your life, for me, I'm married and I've been married 4 years and I'm happily married. However, just like any other relationship, there's moments of hurt, and there's been hurt in our relationship, and we had to decide, are we going to trust and move forward, and are we going to heal? And I think that that's anytime there's hurt, there's an opportunity. Am I going to go on the path that God has set me on to be vulnerable and to be a light and to let God guard my heart? In a sense, yeah, we're supposed to guard it, but at the same time we can turn that into a job that was never our job, and defend ourselves from every possible potential of hurt. And so I think, if it's okay, we can talk about that, because I'm right in the middle of that. How do you trust God, really?
mm,
Because how do you trust God when you've been a person that has experienced hurt, maybe in your childhood, maybe you've healed, and then you have something else to remember, to rekindle that moment of like that fear, that distrust of like, can I really live up? Because when you live with Christ, you are saying, I'm no longer the one that's going to defend myself. I'm no longer the one that's going to shoot off my mouth and say, you can't do that to me. There's
mm,
there's a life of like following Christ that really does mean that you allow yourself to go through pain and struggle and suffering in a way that is like Christ, versus the way that you would do it on your own if you weren't with Christ. And everyone has that mode, right? Like, you have the old Kamilah, I have the old Jen. There's moments like, I know I'm buried, but sometimes like I want to dig my way out, like, well, let me have the old Jen come out here and take care of this situation because this one's hard.
yes.
So I think what you're talking about in friendships, there was a huge blessing and like this beautiful thing only God can do in our friendship. But I don't find that everywhere. And it's
Right.
very rare that someone finds a Samwise. It's very rare that someone finds a David and Jonathan relationship. And many people are lonely and they're wondering, how do you even gain that? And outside of this like beautiful like North Star above it. Like, how do you even start a friendship when you are somebody that might have been hurt? And how do you start being vulnerable, you know? So,
These are such great questions. I'm so excited to talk about this, Jen. And I think, okay, so I have two responses, like two things are
yeah.
coming up for me. The first is I don't think we would have had the friendship we had outside of two things.
Mm,
One is that we were broken. Like we got to a place in our lives where we felt like I'm broken. I want to look to the true answer, which is only fulfilled by God. Like, so that brokenness led us to search for God.
mm,
So, in that search, we became vulnerable to Him first.
mm,
So, our hearts were soft and open to Him, even to a small degree. As you grow, you realize, oh my gosh, like I have so much more vulnerability to grow in with God. But I think at that time in both of our lives, we both had hit a place where we realized I am in the darkness and I can't fix it. I've tried for 28 years to do it my way, and it keeps leading me down the same dark alleys, you know? And so we were both in that place where it was like we were letting God guide us for the first times in our life, right?
yeah.
And I, because of that, He blessed us with this friendship. And then the second thing that's coming up for me is soon as you said, let's talk about this whole journey of how do you trust God and how do you trust people when you've been so bruised and battered and hurt, right? And I feel like God's answer to me was just like in life. Like if somebody showed up at your door and said, hey, hello, I'm Mark, trust me, you would like shut the door because you don't know him. So if you don't know him intimately, even though I'd gone to church every Sunday and my family was always playing music about God and we were always talking about God, I didn't know him. I knew of him, but I didn't know him personally. And so coming to know God personally, like that's the path to trusting him. You don't trust him all at once. Come to know him just like with a person. When you first meet people, adults are terrible at this. Little kids are great at it. Little
Mm,
kids are like, oh my gosh, be my friend. Hi, we're best friends now, you know. Adults, when we meet people, we become terrified little children who've been hurt. And we're just like, you know,
mm,
hi, oh, where do you work? Like we're so awkward, we're so afraid of rejection, and there's so much that's popping up you don't trust right away. But then that person slowly disarms you, or oh, they seem really you get to know who they are and you start to open up a little bit, a little bit. That's the process with God. So I want to tell this story. This is what popped up for me. I was studying the Bible, so I studied the Bible with people for about 2.5 months before I decided, like, yes, I'm all in, right? I was in the middle of studying the Bible, and I had a friend who hurt me. And this friend was the mom of one of my favorite students. I was teaching in Pasadena at the time. And we had developed a casual friendship outside of that. I was teaching her son, and she just was super cool. She had hurt me somehow, and honestly, I have no idea. I don't remember. But back then for me, like if someone hurt me, my way of dealing was like I didn't flash out and get angry and want to go like hurt them, but it was like a subtle like you mean nothing to me now. Like you will never get that close again. Maybe I will never call you again, but I won't acknowledge that I'm upset but it's just like that's like, oh, okay, you're not safe. So I was in that safe mode. I was feeling hurt, but I wasn't acknowledging it or like processing it. Like, I feel hurt. Why do I feel? I wasn't doing it at work. I was just like, she's not safe. And so I felt like God was whispering for me to open my heart and talk to her about it.
mm,
Not even, he wasn't even saying forgive her yet. He was just saying, why don't you open your heart, right? And I was so like shocked and aghast that he would suggest such a thing. It was like, and the picture I had, I said, I feel like God, you're asking me to stick my head inside the mouth of a lion. That's
mhm,
what I feel like you're telling me to do. That's how my little girl self interpreted that. Like, that's like danger. And you're asking me to just like put myself in harm's way. And it was really cool because he was like, yes. And he had me read the story of, oh my gosh, the Lion's Den. I was like, what is it? What the story was? And I was like, oh my gosh, why was it possible? Who was in the Lion's Den? I can't even
Daniel?
remember. Thank you.
Mhm.
Everybody knows that, but I forgot. Um, Daniel the Lion. Why was he able to do that? Because he trusted God. So
Hmm.
it's not a matter of whether this person's going to hurt me or not. He trusted God that God's purposes were always good for him, no matter what situation he was in. But I remember reading Psalm 91 as a really baby Christian. And Psalm 91 is so beautiful, and it's like he that dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Like, that's the opening. And then it goes and says all this awesome stuff that God will do for you. And it's such a beautiful thing to read. And I remember reading it and being like, you know that this is true about God? It's not that I think that's not God. I know I said to God after I read it, I was like, on my knees, I was like, I know it's true. I just don't know that it's true for me. I don't know that you're going to show up and do this for me. And even being able to say that was vulnerable and took a lot to be able to even allow myself to feel that, and took a lot of practice because I wouldn't even acknowledge that I had emotions for most of my life before. I remember saying that to God, and I remember him whispering gently back to me. Like, he wasn't mad and he wasn't like, ugh, you don't believe. Just like whispered back to me, let me show you. And as he said it to me, I felt like he was saying, not once, not tomorrow, not next Thursday. He was saying, like, give me time every day. Let me show you how much I love you. And
Mhm.
so I said, okay. And for years, I would pray to him, like, can you please show me how much you love me today? And me, I was just a fragile little broken girl. I looked like an adult, but I just really wasn't inside.
Yeah.
I just wasn't. Am I talking too much?
Oh, no. I'm listening.
um, so I felt like after a time, I shouldn't have been able to pray that prayer. Like, it should have been time for me to be like, okay, you've shown me so much. That's good enough, right? But no, it was years. And I would pray it almost not every day, but a lot. I would pray it a lot, like days of the week. Like, I need it. I just like this broken, fragile little girl. And as he began to build the trust in me, he would build trust by showing up, by answering prayer. He would move things in the world, in my life, in certain ways to show me, like, I'm doing this. He would speak to me through the scriptures. A lot of people do very, like, thought out and well prepared study of scriptures, and I think that's wonderful and very fruitful. But for most of my walk, it was like, God, I'm feeling this. What do you have to tell me? And he would either like show me a scripture in my head, or I would just know that he wanted me to go to First Corinthians or whatever. Or I literally would just open the Bible,
Mhm.
and he would always answer. He was always showing me, I'm here with you. He would talk to me in my dreams. I mean, he was always, and so he would build that. Even as he was showing me that he was there for me, there were still these deep, broken parts of my heart that I didn't realize were connected to the abuse and feeling unloved growing up. All these things, these past hurts that were in the way of me truly surrendering everything and trusting God. And I feel like that kind of stuff is the kind of stuff you go to a an excellent surgeon for. It's like out of
Mhm.
my hands. Like, there's nothing, I can't fix it. But God is that excellent surgeon. He took me through very painful things in my life, um, such as my second son passing away. He allowed that to happen so that he could crack my heart all the way open, heal the deepest, deepest wounds that were so far below the surface. I was so good at living on top of the surface of life and being like, Like I became really like, I'm going to be good at being a mom and I'm going to be good at being a Christian. It was living on the surface. It wasn't getting down deep into the yuck, the deepest broken parts of my heart. And he allowed my second son, Zion, to pass on in December of 2013. And that's a whole nother story that I won't get into today, but because he allowed that, he allowed me to connect to these really like brokenest parts of me, the true who I was underneath all of the performance, underneath all of the being a good Christian, underneath all of the striving, was this really broken girl who believed that no one would ever love her, that she was worthless, and that she had been alone her whole life. These are lies, but they did not feel like lies to me. They were the truth that ruled my heart underneath the Bible. Okay, so that's my long, short answer to that. I don't know. You want to
I
pipe
love
in?
your long, short answer. I think that's helpful. I think, I asked that question for myself in different seasons, but also for a lot of people, because I know right now with the coronavirus going on and being away from people, loneliness can set in. And it's very easy to just hit the surface in relationships, and then you start wondering, how do you reconnect to people, and what is connection? And sometimes you can watch TV shows and see like the connection and friendships, and then you can sense like, I don't have that in my life right now, or I'm missing those relationships. And for me, what comes up for me, from, I'm sure like a lot of people can relate to, like you, like there's past experiences that inform us of, you might be hurt. And I think as a disciple, I was kind of approaching this high idea, if I trust God, I won't be hurt, because now his new job is to keep me away from hurt. And so in your example of Daniel and the lion, the lion could be a circumstance, a thing around us, and or like fire, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. And it's like, yes, God has the ability to protect us from those things that can harm us, or like what feels like harm, but it's like painful. And he can save us from that. But sometimes he does allow things to happen. And so sometimes I want to demote him from his job of like protector, if like, well, I felt pain there,
Ah,
your job was to not allow me to feel pain. And like you you
yes.
you lost your son, but what God did was break you free from things that were holding you to almost like a false God. And I know that there are things that God will allow in my friendships or my relationships, that instead of looking at the person like, can I trust them? I
Yeah.
know I need to look at God and say, I trust you. And worst case scenario, you will be there with me. And the reason why worst case scenario might even be to save me from myself and the things that I run to. Because if you remember, my story was I eloped and got married, and I said, salvation is here, because I looked for salvation in man. And that girl still has that old Jen has that tendencies to still look to man. Is he trustworthy? Will he, or will she be my friend? Will she keep that, like just between us? Will, those
Ah,
things like that? Will she judge me? Well, all these different things. Should I open myself up again? And I think I have to always keep resetting my eyes to, I'm not looking for perfect case scenario. If that's the case, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Because emotionally and spiritually I won't do well. But if I could look at God through the lens of, you know what, I'm not looking at my circumstances to be better and for me to feel comfortable. I have
mm,
to look at like, does God know me and know what I need to go through to be a better Christ-like woman, to be set free of the things that I don't know are is bondage, but he's breaking those bonds. Like we always ask for freedom, but the way God frees us is something through pain, usually through painful circumstances. And then on the other
ah,
side, you're like, I hated that, but man, I wouldn't change that for the life of me, like that changed me, that made me a better woman, that made me trust in God. And so friendships is one of those places that we, relationships, the Bible's full of one another scriptures. And yet people have a hard time committing to one another, let alone doing those things for one another. And it's because we're afraid. We're afraid of getting hurt. And that sometimes becomes, for me personally, that can be my God, not getting hurt.
Yes.
It's my God's
Yes.
time. So I'm sharing it for everyone
That
to
was my
know.
only goal in life. Don't
Yeah.
get hurt.
Yes, and only those that will never hurt me will be invited to the circle of friendship. Oh,
Why am I
I
so
get it.
alone?
Pew, 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 pew. Oh, you're off the island, and then sooner or later, it's just you on the island and your dog. And I'm grateful for dogs. They don't really hurt you, but that's not the way I'm supposed to live. And so there's these moments, is fight or flight. And I have the opportunity to either do like old Jen, who was buried and wants to
Yeah.
dig her way out, or like Christ, who's like, I will take this cup, and I trust in you, and I will entrust myself to you, not to Peter, who denied me, not to Judas, who betrayed me. I love
Mhm.
them still. I can love them unconditionally when I
Yeah.
love you, Father, and I trust you. See, we become better friends when we trust God, because I'm not needing Kamilah, you, to be this perfect girl in order to be my friend. And I won't kick you off the island every time you hurt my feelings. But if you are my God, Kamilah, you absolutely will get kicked off the island, because I can't trust you now. And my whole goal is be safe. you know, when you're, it's a
Yes.
different goal. I need to
Woo!
love, not safe.
Well
So
said. I just felt like clapping for you that whole time. So true. And I know for me, I made an idol of everyone. I mean, I just needed other people to say that I was worthy. And so
whew,
the
yeah,
slightest misstep, you can't be, you can't make a mistake. You can't have a moment where you're feeling selfish or you're feeling sad or you can't have that, because I need you to be my support. I need you to say, to be my security. You don't get to be human.
yes, that's
And when I was first married, I was always doing that to my husband. And like every human flaw that he had was like, this is not going to work because I need you to be like Jesus for me every second of the day. And you are not, by the way. So we have a problem.
yeah,
It was all about me, but it was because I was looking for that security the only way that I knew how, without God. And I remember, I think I've told you this. I remember when I was first married, that first year, Tori, my husband and I, Tori, we both come from wildly, like a lot of childhood abuse in different ways. And the way he dealt with it was like, he's independent. I don't care what anybody thinks. Like, I'm not going to let anybody control me. And there's just such a strength in that I need to see. I look at it like one of those TV shows, like the lion, like I'm like, how does he do that? Like, I remember he would come home from church and he might have an opinion different than what the pastor said. Like, I don't think we should. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you're so unspiritual, to have your own opinions. Anyway, so he's like bold and he's strong and he definitely has his pride, but he wears it all on the outside. Where me, my sins like inside, like put on that good happy face. And so we would kind of like clash because I was always looking for connection. My family was very disconnected emotionally. His family was like heightened emotions, like "Ah, ah." So he is looking for disconnection. He's afraid of that like conflict, and he's like avoided at all costs, where I'm like, we need to connect, we need to talk. Both of us coming from very immature backgrounds emotionally, right? So now every time he has a disconnect, every time he's upset, every time I'm freaking out because I'm like, no, you need to be my
oh yeah,
connection. You need to
oh,
be my security. And he would tell me like, he would tell me, I feel like I can't do anything right. And I was like, that's not true at all. You do stuff right. It's the wrong stuff I want to talk about. But I didn't get it for years. It was like year 4 where I finally realized, oh my gosh, this has to do with me. and me making you an idol.
Yeah,
And
because for us, it's funny, we make them an idol, which is like kind of saying we're making them the god, but really at the same time we're being God, because we're like
we're the
forming
God.
the idol. We're like,
Yes.
no, you're like that, so I gotta nag you more. You're like
Yes.
that, I have to convict you more. You're like that, so I have to make you more responsible. And we're like, no, this is the way that you will serve me if
Yeah.
you could be more like this. And then we start ending up being God ourselves in that sense. We're the manipulators
Mm-hmm.
to,
Yes.
I do mean in the sense that like the forming of manipulation, but also we use the technique of manipulation, and it's all different for everyone. But it's everything that it breaks down relationships pretty much. When we look to each other, when I need something from you that I should be looking to God for, when I am desperate for approval from you, and I can't afford to be told something that would affect how I see myself, even if it's true or not. It's anything that can invoke the childhood wounds of shame, or, those we walk around on eggshells, or the landmines, and years go on, and I'm not just saying in marriage or friendships, it's our lives. It could be like the mailman, it doesn't really matter. It's just that island where you start kicking everyone off. And so I feel like to be a great friend like Jesus, we have to have the relationship with the Father like Jesus.
Yes.
And that's the only way Jesus could have been friends, genuine friends with Judas.
Yep.
How do you invite someone to be part of your life for 3 years, and you're going to hold nothing back, literally even the money bag, who you knew he was taking money from? He didn't go and morph him and be like, I need to convict. He's like, he knows the truth. His life is his life. He has free will. Let's see what he does with it. Like, Jesus allowed even dangerous people in his circle. Yes, he didn't let him hear, as Peter, Paul, no, uh, James, Peter. What am I talking about? Who are his three
John.
peeps?
John.
John. Thank you. Yeah, he not the inner circle, but Jesus allowed himself to have relationship with people he even saw he knew would hurt him. And I'm using that as an example of, we have perceived moments of hurt.
Yeah.
And we have perceived moments of like, I don't know about this person, and yet we're nothing like Jesus, until perfection. But like, Jesus literally loved Judas even when he betrayed him. He allowed him to kiss him. Would you allow someone to kiss you, in that
I
moment? And
know.
he called him friend. And so when I'm talking to God one day and I'm face to face, it won't be, well, so and so did that to me, so and so did that to me, so and so did that to me, and that's why I said that, and that's why I did that. He's gonna say, no, I gave you Jesus, your bestie, Jesus. Hopefully he's my bestie, right? And how did he show you how to live? Did you love the people I gave? No, 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 I didn't, because they needed to love me. No, you and I was supposed to fulfill all the love in your heart, and what you needed was supposed to come from me. I told you this world was broken. I told you everyone here was sick, and I gave Jesus as the doctor to heal. And once, like, are you part, just like, the responsibility will go to me. It's not going to go, but they, even the worst, the worst imaginable thing that can happen in your life through an outside person doesn't take away the responsibility for me to still be like Christ. And so friendship, I always think outside, are they a good friend to me? But I don't always think, am I a good friend for them? Am I someone that is vulnerable and loving and not on guard all the time, not naive? Like the Mark that comes to my door, he's not gonna, I don't know him yet. But as I let somebody in, as God allows me, and we use discernment, then at some point this person might be my friend. And how am I going to be, so I think we have a problem with getting what we need from others. I definitely do, and it leads to the opposite of what God wants: love, relationship, connection. But it's good to talk about what those things are that block our relationship and our connection. We're supposed to fulfill God's purposes in relationship. So of course the enemy wants to like make you afraid and make you turn against each other and create wars. Not the kind you think of like World War I, but like in our heart, bitterness, resentment. That's war, the hostility. So
Mhm.
it's all the things that it's important to talk about. If you have relationships in your life that are like, I don't know about this person, and you have hurts and pains, like it might be something you need to talk out and talk through, because in order to be connected to God, your relationships actually matter to God. you know it's
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful? As well as I just think my friendships matter to God, how they are, the health of them. My relationship to my husband, my relationship with my mother-in-law, my relationship with Kamilah and other friends, they matter.
Yeah.
So
I think what you're saying is so true. And think about how God made the rivers to flow into larger bodies of water, which in turn flow into larger bodies of water. And I feel like that's how relationship is. Like we're meant to receive from others and to give to others. And the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea because not because other bodies of water don't flow into it, but because it doesn't flow into anything else. And so that's who I was spiritually for all of my life. Is like I was like a emotional vampire. I thought I was a giving person. Like if you met me, you wouldn't be like she's a horrible person. But all of my giving was only to receive. It was only
mm,
like oh, I'm gonna give this because then they will like me. Like I'm gonna love them so they will love me. So I can
mm,
feel safe. And I think until we're willing to look at our deepest hurts from the past, they're filling us up. All of our pain from the past, the hurts from the past, the grief from the past, the fear, the shame, it fills us up inside so that we can only receive a little bit from God. And so the more we grieve and process through the pain and let go of it, which is a long and painful process. I don't
yeah.
mean to make light of that, but it's also a beautiful process when you can do it with God. It's beautiful. It changes you forever.
Hmm.
If you go through that, you become empty of that and you get to be filled more with God's peace and joy, and your insecurities leave and he fills you up with strength and power. The less of you that's in there from the past, the more of him. And then when you're filled up with his joy and love, you can pour it out onto
Mm,
others. And I think that's something I didn't understand before. And when I was just trying to survive, because I was leading my life with fear, right?
mm,
The protection you're
yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
When that's my goal, I'm full up
Yeah.
with all of my past, all of my shame, all of my fear. That's the only thing that leads me. I have nothing to give you except insecurity and fear and pain and shame. But if I'm in denial, I blame you for that.
Mm,
That's what I did.
mm,
So when you're inadequate, it makes me feel inadequate and I blame you. And
mm.
that's way safer than to having a mirror and saying, what does this remind me of?
Yeah.
Wasn't this all over my life long before I ever met you? So maybe I need to look at me instead of you. And I think that's a really hard thing to do because what's in the way is the hope. And only God can provide that hope. That's why we don't look at our shame and our fear. We're like, oh, I got rid of that. Like I got out of that situation. I don't want to go back. But it's God who provides the hope in the situation. And so I did go back to that friend who had hurt me. And
Mhm.
it was like I was a leaf shaking, like, oh, it's like I never had these conversations. And I was like so embarrassed and feeling fragile and afraid. And I told her how I felt. She was so kind and so loving. And we had a great talk. And we are friends to this day. But without God's intervention, that would have been the last time I ever talked to her.
Yeah.
I
I
think it's such a great thing that you bring up, Jen. Thank you so much for this
Yeah.
talk.
I really appreciate what you last, shared, just the metaphor of the Dead Sea and, all the different ways of um, wanting something in return, but how Christ really did lay down his life and period, you know, and it was only to offer us something, not so that
Yeah.
way anything. It was just an invitation, and I feel like that's such a great question for me and for anyone listening, is just, you know, it's that connection to, one, what triggers me? How does this connect to my past? I'm living life in the present, but really I'm so still wounded from the past. It's hard for me to move forward. That's a big, component of what you were saying. But also just like, you know, in relationship, who am I? How am I showing up? And in relationship to God, how can he heal these places in my life so I actually have life to the full that Jesus promised? It's really hard to have life to the full when you are not connected and giving and loving and serving and also being the recipient of love and connection. So I really appreciated what you shared. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that I hope we could talk about are things that I personally relate to, that I could be personally struggling with, and hopefully you too. But because none of us is at some point like, well, I'm done with that. There's moments of like huge growth, but at the same time, we're human, and that's the relationship with Jesus. If we were not in need of help and healing, there'd be so much that we'd be missing the opportunity of clinging closer to Jesus. So,
Yes. Thank you. And I think, to close, I think just it's so important to understand like the way that we fall short of the glory of God, like we all fall short. And the way in which we fall short, that's what sin is. It's like, oh, we don't know how to do this the way that God designed us to do it. And the way that we're doing it actually damages us even more, as well as other people. But you're doing it for a reason. There's something in you that has a need that you don't know how to get met. And that's why you're not trusting. That's why you're not vulnerable. That's why I wasn't. But it's God who wants to fulfill his needs. Therefore, it makes your coping mechanisms unnecessary, And I think it's so important for people who are wounded and hurting and who do have a lot of hurt in your past to hear that message. It's not just like you gotta, straighten up and start loving people and trust God. Like, no, it's all about getting to those deep places in your heart when you're feeling hurt by someone, like Jen was saying, to ask yourself, where have I felt this before in my life? When was the first time I felt it in a very powerful way? Let me try to. And I would sometimes not even have answers to those questions, but I would pray and I would ask God to show me. Always would take me back. He would always show me. And I think one of the biggest lessons I learned out of doing that heart work after Zion passed on was all of the people that I had feared. Like I'd go back and I'd be like, oh yeah, I felt so unsafe with that person. I felt so unsafe with that person. I felt so hurt by that person. There were so many, right? And it led me to a life of fearing everyone. Um, I, I journaled through all of those times and I realized, oh my gosh, the reason I felt unsafe was because I did not stand for myself in this moment.
mm,
And I took on a belief about myself in that moment. I gave other people permission to say
mm,
who I am and what I'm worth and what my name is,
mm,
you know? And so it was so cool to do that work because it allowed me to take back my power and say, I'm the one who abandons me. That's why I feel so abandoned all the time. I say I'm not worthy. I say that you get to decide my worth.
oh
And
yeah,
that was the beginning of me saying, well, what if I didn't choose that anymore?
yeah,
What? So
yeah,
anyway, so the work is beautiful if you're willing to go there.
mm,
And I feel like I never did it without God. It was always God leading the way and saying, let's go here. Let's talk about this. And I had to take his hand and bow my head and say, okay, I trust.
Hmm. Beautiful. Thank you, Kamilah, for that. You know, you've definitely led the way in so much healing in my life just by your example and you doing the work and you sharing it with me. So thank you for sharing a little bit of that work right now and the huge treasures that you found in the truth with God and the empowerment that you had to be different now. So
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you for our
He's
time.
the hope. Yeah, I'm so glad that we got to share this. And so we'll be having many more conversations in the future. And Jen, thank you so much for all that you shared too, your wisdom, your love, your walk, your failures, your victories. And until next time,
Okay.
here, let
Bye.
me pause it.